I'm Stacy Grinsfelder from Blake Hill House.
And this is Devyn Caldwell from Our Philly Row. And we're the hosts of True Tales from Old Houses.
Hey, Devyn, how's it going?
It's going great. How's it going up in New York?
We are good here.
Yeah, summer's there.
Summer is absolutely here, and we're loving it. You will not hear me complain for 1 second about the weather in the summer.
Yeah, it's here in Philadelphia too. We can definitely feel it.
All right, we just have one super quick announcement, nothing major. We're going to get this episode moving, but I did want to mention again, we talked about it last episode, about the fact that we are going on hiatus briefly. Our next new episode will come out Monday, July 6th. And while we are on hiatus, we are encouraging you to fill out our survey. We have created a survey. You'll have an opportunity to tell us what you like about the show, how you'd like us to do things differently, ways that we can improve. And we'll put a link to that right over on the show notes. That's basically all the announcements we have. I think there are some workshops going on in June, maybe in your area. We won't be around to announce those, but be sure and check all your favorite preservation trades, locations, websites, that sort of thing, and see if there is a workshop near you.
We should put a page up of listing of different organizations around the country and ask our listeners to let us know what those are, and we'll add them to a page.
That's a great idea. Okay. So all the things that we put in announcements, maybe, sometimes we announce workshops and things like that. We can put those also on that page so you can go back and reference that. So if you've listened to an episode and you think, oh, I remember they were talking about something, that was happening, but you don't exactly remember which episode, you can go to the page, look at the resource page, and it will be listed there.
Yes. So if you fill out the survey, please tell us the different organizations that you'd like us to add to our page.
And if you are a preservation trades organization of some kind and you are running a workshop, please do send us through the website. Let us know when your workshop is and give us some more information. We can put it on a resource page. Also, if it's during our normal season, we can announce it during an episode. Do you have any plans for this break? I mean, I guess we've been so in the thick of this podcasting stuff for weeks that I have barely even thought about break, but do you have plans?
I do. So I have been focusing on my studio, which is a very slow project. I'm sitting here as we record, I'm in my studio and I look around, I'm like, yeah, I haven't done anything. I have, but just not much. But we're starting to use the backyard, and our priority is to bring water and electricity to the backyard because there has never been water or electricity in the backyard.
Really?
So there's no way to hose things down. It's really frustrating. And I want to grow plants. And that's my goal, is to bring us into the 20th century.
So do you even have one hose bib or anything on your house? Is there any place where you can hook up a hose?
There's a hose bib on the front, on the sidewalk. But, being a row house, we have neighbors on both sides. So our backyard is essentially isolated. There's like a little gate you can go through to a neighbor's yard. And then from their yard, there's a passageway, but it's no direct access to get to the backyard. So you're on your little island in the backyard.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. That'll be really nice to spend some time outside, I'm sure, with things watered and also maybe some fun lights.
Yeah. Oh, there's some fun lights out there now because I have an extension cord. But I mentioned island. I have to clarify. My island is about 6 inches away from the island next door, and 6 inches away from the other one on the other side. So, we're all very close together. It's not a lot of privacy.
Yeah, it's not a deserted island by any means. It's just an island. Unfortunately, all of my June travel plans have been canceled. Normally, part of the reason why we take the hiatus in June, we structure the season this way, is because I am almost always gone for a good chunk of June. This time I will be home. I won't be going anywhere, just like probably most of us won't be going anywhere the month of June. I imagine I'll just be working on windows and of course getting the next season ready. We've got a lot of really fun things planned, and that requires some work and some dedication. So we'll spend some of our time during break getting ready for season 4.
Yep.
For this last listener question of the season, we have a good one. I think it's a lot of fun. Devyn, you want to read the question for us?
Sure. Have you ever regretted a design decision, either interior or otherwise, that you have made to your home to the point of completely starting over?
Do you want to answer this first or do you want me to?
You go for it.
Okay. I mean, honestly, I hadn't really thought about this question at all until we got it. Like, it just never crossed my mind. And the answer, I guess, obviously is no. No, I have not regretted a design decision, interior or otherwise. I guess I've regretted it, but never to the point of starting over because I don't have that kind of money. I have to live with my decision generally, but what has happened over time, what I have started to develop over time is this ability to wait until I'm really sure. And sometimes I do make mistakes, like I don't like the paint color in the living room, or I don't like this, but I can't imagine if I don't like something that I did afterwards, then that is just really too bad, so sad, because I'm going to be living with it for quite some time. How about you?
I'm pretty much in the same boat. If I've invested in something and I don't like it, I'm going to just live with it for a while. The one thing I will say is I can't think of any situations where that's been a really big issue because I tend to be a bit of an overthinker. I say that with a
really?
Yeah, really, yes. I am an overthinker. And so usually once I have finally made the decision, I have thought about it way more than anyone ever should need to. And right. I'm pretty confident in that decision. And I also feel like I have a fairly good sense of design. And so I'm not likely to put really bad things together. That said, there are times where I have done some things, small projects, and I looked back and thought, that could be better, or we need to make some changes, but not to really start all over again.
I was working on the upstairs bathroom, our main bathroom, the one that I call the scary bathroom on the blog, on the Blake Hill House blog, even though it's not scary anymore. But I remember starting to paint that floor up there, and I picked some sort of green color, and it was horrific. And I did change my mind. I mean, I was just putting it down thinking, this is wrong. This is wrong. The whole time I'm just like swiping it on. And then I got to the end and I thought, no. So I went to the basement. I didn't go buy something new, but I did go to the basement. I happened to have another color of kind of a greenish gray that I ended up using. But that's probably the closest I've ever come to just flat out knowing that disaster was occurring right before me. Everything else, it's just... Sometimes it's a swing and a miss, but that's how life goes,
That's right.
You live with your mistakes and you learn from them.
That's right. Today's guest is Melissa Mortimer from Southeast Tennessee. She describes herself as the Leslie Knope of historic preservation, and her handle on Instagram is Deserve to Preserve. That's deserve, the number 2, and preserve.
Did you ever watch Parks and Rec? Do you know Leslie Knope?
I'm not really familiar with it, no, unfortunately.
Well, you're probably not the only one. Leslie Knope is a character played by Amy Poehler, and she is an eternal optimist who thrives on small-town government and red tape. She's a very likable character, and Melissa, quite frankly, I thought, is a very likable person. So it kind of makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense that she would describe herself that way. Melissa works in historic preservation, and we'll dig into her actual job duties during the interview.
But we asked her on the show, in part, so we could really dig into what a historic designation means for a home or commercial building, and what protections, if any, that designation offers.
So I'm Melissa Mortimer. I'm a historic preservation planner for a 10-county region of Southeast Tennessee. I have a master's in historic preservation and an undergraduate degree in interior design. And I work for local governments now doing National Register nominations, tax credits, grants, all kinds of technical assistance to smaller local governments that might not necessarily have the funding to have a specialized position like a planner.
You're busy. You have a lot going on.
Definitely.
Lots of cities.
Right. Well, I was really interested in having you on. Thank you for being here, by the way. Very interested in kind of rounding out the educational component of the show because we have a lot of people who are interested in maybe listing their houses on the National Register, also buildings. There's a lot of misconceptions about just terminology, and we thought that perhaps you could clear some of that up for us.
Yeah, I would love to.
Well, let's start by talking about Louis Sullivan.
Louis Sullivan is my new preservation pup that is obviously named after the architect Louis Sullivan, the father of the American skyscraper. I wanted to do a preservation or architecture term for the dog, but for some reason, jerkin head, I guess it's jerk.
My dog, Architrave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about Pediment? The dog Pediment?
Call him Little Petty.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I like it. Is he adjusting really well to home life now?
So far, he's a lot of work. I'm a little nervous about when I have to go back to the office. I'm not here 24/7, but I think we're doing like a staggered coming back with Tennessee.
Well, congratulations on the new preservation pup.
Yeah, I've told him, I said, the 2 rules in here are you must respect all historic woodwork and interior houseplant.
That's awesome.
How's he doing with that so far?
Good. I'm like, we do not touch historic doors. You do not scratch that. So far, so good.
Oh, that's cute. All right. Well, I've got a question to start us off, and I would like to know how you got started in the preservation field. You gave us a whole lot of, your education, your things that you've done. When did the preservation bug bite you? When did this all come about?
So my undergrad was interior design, and I went with, actually, I have a twin sister, and she's has a art degree. And we went and studied abroad in Italy in undergrad, studying Italian Renaissance art and architecture. And I always wanted to get something after interior design. I was also looking at landscape architecture. And when we went to Italy, I just fell in love with historic buildings. And I've always loved sustainability. So I thought, well, what's more green than reusing a building? So I really was interested in that design aspect of reusing an old mill for loft apartments, reusing a space for sustainability, and also just like falling in love with historic architecture. And my brother is also an architect. So in the family biz, when I graduated, I decided I got into University of Tennessee landscape architecture program, and then University of Kentucky historic preservation. So I kind of made that choice then.
So you're in Tennessee now. Have you always been or have you always lived in Tennessee?
Yep, I'm from Chattanooga, Tennessee. I've been here pretty much my whole life, except for I went to school in Kentucky for 6 years, which it's something I found really interesting is just like the difference in time periods for houses. Even just in Kentucky, one state up, a federal house seems to be a lot earlier than houses down here. The styles are just so different. We don't have that many like high style houses, and early like 1830s houses here are going to be like log cabins. So it's really interesting the differences and where you are in the country in terms of style.
I had the same experience when I came to Philadelphia. It's just wandering around and just realizing just how old. Even like my neighborhood, 2 blocks down the street are houses from the 1820s.
Yeah.
It's wild.
I know like one house here, it's like 1830s. And here it's like, oh, your house is 1920s. It's old. Up north, it wouldn't be that. You're like, okay, it's old, but.
Right. Well, I was going to ask you what part of history has influenced the architecture where you are in Tennessee?
Well, this influence is everywhere, but one of my favorite things is the WPA and like the New Deal and all that sort of like government infrastructure that was built. I mean, here we have a lot of brick buildings because we don't have to worry about earthquakes, that sort of thing. But of course, we also, with the Civil War being big here, we lost a lot. So our downtown doesn't, because Sherman came through burning down to Atlanta. So we don't have that old of commercial buildings either. But I don't know if there is any big thing that can really change or influence our architecture specifically here.
So on a day-to-day basis, tell us what kind of things your job entails.
Since I work for local governments, I work as a grant for Historic Preservation Fund grant that's funded by the National Park Service that is divvied out to each state. So the SHPO, as we call it, or the State Historic Preservation Office, funds my position. So I'm kind of their person on the ground in my region of Tennessee. So day to day, every day is different. A lot of days I'm working on grants. I have 4 grants open right now. One, we're restoring windows in a L&N train depot.
Thank you.
Windows. Yep. My grants that I wrote this past year were for window restoration.
Love it.
And we just did a bid for another historic library up in Grundy County. So working on grant administration on that is a big part of my job. Work on National Register nominations. I help with tax credits. I do a lot of site visits and survey work. So there's a thing called Section 106, which is part of the National Preservation Act of 1966, which protects historic resources from federal undertakings. So a federal undertaking is pretty much anything that involves the federal government, permits, funding. So I do a lot of Section 106 reviews for projects. So if they're putting in a new sewer line, I'm going to have to look at all the houses along that street where the sewer line is to make sure that it's not going to adversely impact any historic resources. You do like cell phone towers. There's like an APE, which area of potential effect, making sure it's not going to visually impact a historic resource. So like here we have the Chattanooga Choo Choo is one of our most historic buildings. They're not going to allow them to put a cell tower out in its view shed. So stuff like that is kind of, every day is different. None of them are the same, but doing a little bit of all of that every day.
Right.
That's what keeps it interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely fun. I like getting out in the field. And we have a lot of, I have 10 counties, so there's so many different, settings and different building styles. So it's really enjoyable.
Yeah, that's a lot of counties. That's a lot of places that you're working with to make sure they're following these guidelines.
Yeah.
Which specific agencies do you work with in your job?
So I work with the SHPO along with the National Park Service. So with everything, you're going to want to work with your state historic preservation office first. And then they have it, like for tax credits, National Register, it goes in front of a state review board before it goes to the federal keeper of the deeds. There's 3 parts to a tax credit act. And all of those go to your SHPO first, and then they submit it to the Park Service for comment and with their comment. I work with the federal government a lot. I'm working on a retracement trail for the Trail of Tears right now. And so I'm working with the National Park Service Intermountain Trail Division because they have 9 historic trails and one of them is Trail of Tears. So we're working with them directly on a retracement of an area where the original route went. So we had like a historic post office. I posted this the other day on my Instagram, but the federal post office even has their own division of preservationists.
Oh, wow.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So like they watch over all the historic post offices. So we had a community that wanted to list their post office. You actually, for that, instead of just going to SHPO, you have to get permission from the post office and like go through their preservation staff and see if they think it's eligible in this whole separate thing. So there's always a tie to both state and federal government with all your projects, whether it's you contact them directly or the state does.
Where I lived in California, there was a tiny little community attached to our tiny little town. And there was a post office, a historic post office. It was just a shack, basically. And it was a working post office. So people really got their mail there. There were P.O. boxes. And it was on the register. Let's talk about it's the National Register of Historic Places. Is that correct? Because a lot of times we get it all confused.
Yes. And I do want to preface this with saying, like, it's all states are different. The National Register is all the same, but some states do have state registers. Tennessee does not, but other states do. So, and some people have local register listing. So I could really only speak to Tennessee. So I don't want someone coming after me being like, she's not right about this.
No, that's okay. Let's start on the national level first, and then we'll go back down. We'll start moving towards the state level and then local. So let's start nationally, since that affects everybody, at least in the U.S., who listens to our podcast. Okay.
So the National Register of Historic Places, it's commonly misconceived for more protection than it is. So the National Register, again, going back to the Preservation Act of 1966, was put in place as this register of historic places. Identifying places that are significant for history, architecture, archaeology, relationship to a person. So that was their list. And so with Section 106 that we talked about, that you can't adversely affect a historic resource, they're going to look at National Register listed properties along with anything that's eligible for a National Register listing. So all that to say, the National Register, the only regulations it puts on a building is against federal undertakings. So people are always say, oh, well, I don't want my house on the National Register because then you're going to tell me what color to paint it, which is not true. Anything using your personal money, we cannot tell you what to do. Anything. You could hate to say it, but you could demolish your house if it was on the National Register and no one could do anything about it. It's really like an overall honorary designation, and also like it gives protection to your house or something from federal undertakings like a cell tower. You think about most roads are federally funded. So anytime there's a road widening and all that, they're going to look at National Register listings in the area, how that road's going to impact that listing or any eligible districts. And then also it opens you up in some states to tax credit opportunities.
Okay. Which we'll get there in just a second. So federal undertakings you're saying are cell towers, roads. Can you give us any other examples of a federal undertaking?
Anytime there's federal money involved. So if your local government is using federal money to put in a new water line on your street, they're going to look at, is this a historic district? How is this going to impact? Are we going to dig up historic sidewalks? Are there, here we have the CCC,
right.
So in Conservation Corps, a lot of stone walls. Is this digging this up going to affect the walls? So they're going to look at all that and make sure that there's no adverse effect. And so that's kind of another example. But anything involving federal money permit.
Okay. Is there a difference between residential designation or commercial designation?
No, they're all the same. So the National Register it could be a structure. It could be, there's, farmsteads. You could have multiple property listings. There's even specific nominations you could do. Like we have one here in Chattanooga that's specific for an architect. So it's a kind of a multiple property one that just lists on the same one every building that R.H. Hunt designed, who's an architect here. But yeah, there's districts and individual nominations and then like multiple property, but it doesn't matter if it's commercial or residential. They're all the same.
What are some of the designations that homeowners or businesses can pursue to help save old buildings?
The thing that has the most teeth in terms of protection for historic preservation is local designations. So they're depending on how a city is set up and their ordinances, like State of Chattanooga has local historic districts. So local historic districts are designated, and they actually have the ability, unlike the National Register, to keep from demolitions, to keep from doing, big additions on the side that are going to change the integrity of the structure. They're gonna be doing those small things that people are nervous about when they look at National Register.
Right.
You're going to tell me not all of them go down to detail of what color you could paint your building, but we're going to look at like the character defining features normally in a district. We're going to want you to keep your historic windows like Stacy would want us to do.
I have no problem with that. Yes.
I know. Every time someone comes, I'm also sit on our local historic zoning commission here for Chattanooga. And every time someone comes up and contractor and we're like, well, they're painted shut, we have to replace them. And I'm like, I don't think so.
Wielding the power.
Yes, I saw Scott from the Craftsman blog was saying that he's chairman or something of his, and I said, man, I really wish I could have you just be a fly on the wall in those commission meetings when those contractors come up and tell you can't fix their windows.
Right. I was reading a very popular DIY blog. It's not old house related. Well, but they work a lot with old houses. And one of I'm not going to say who it was, but one of the articles was, we had to replace all the windows. We wanted to save them. We really did, but we just couldn't do it. And I was just like, oh, yes, you could have. I'm like, so judgy. I know it's so judgy, but it's frustrating to hear those misconceptions perpetuated over and over and over again. And when you have a big voice with lots of people that you're speaking to get that message out there in that way is just like, one step back again,
No.
It's really discouraging.
The big window manufacturers, they want to sell you new windows every 20 years because that's how they stay in business.
Right.
When I bought my house, it has vinyl windows, which I hate.
Mine too. It's okay.
I know, But my neighbors have their original windows. So when I first went to meet them, I saw they were missing 2 glass panes on their enclosed black porch. And I was like, "Hi, I'm Melissa. Can I fix your windows? I noticed you're missing some glass, and like, I really don't want you to replace the windows." So they're like, "You know how to do that?" And we put on a local, well, we had to postpone it, but a window restoration class here in Chattanooga, and my neighbor signed up for it. And his wife is a blogger, and she wrote, well, she's a writer, but she has her own personal blog, and she wrote about her windows. And she's like, "Now that my neighbor has moved in, I've learned to appreciate my windows, and we can't wait to restore them."
That's awesome.
That's
so honored.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So every house matters.
For sure. And
Yes, it does. Yeah.
It's funny because it doesn't matter. Like, as soon as you start talking to people about their old windows, they usually get really into it. You know, you might start that conversation. They'll say something like, "Oh, they stick in the summer. They're such a pain.
They're drafty."
They're drafty. And then when you start having that conversation about them, then all of a sudden, you know, it kind of changes.
Yeah.
I mean, they still have the same frustrations because we all do. They're not perfect. I would be lying if I said I didn't have my own frustrations with my windows, but the benefit far outweighs the drawbacks.
Definitely. But I think I got off topic there. We're talking about.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. Devyn, it is the end of the season, and we have one more opportunity to tell people all the ways that they can support True Tales from Old Houses.
The first way you can help is to spread the word. If you know somebody who would love this podcast, tell them about it and explain how and where to listen. You can also share us on social media. As you are listening to an episode, take a screenshot and send it to your friends or followers. Use the hashtag True Tales from Old Houses, and feel free to tag Stacy and I. You can also leave us a rating and a review wherever you listen to podcasts. These ratings and reviews help other people find us, and it also tells them that this show is worth a listen. And finally, over on the True Tales from Old Houses website, you can make a one-time or reoccurring monthly donation to the show. Your donations go directly towards the cost of producing this podcast and creating a more engaging and useful content. As a special thank you, if you donate $20 to $25 or more, we'll send you a coffee mug with the True Tales from Old Houses logo on it.
Thank you so much to all of you for listening, for your support, for caring about this show. You are the reason we do this. So we talked about federal, the designation, which doesn't do much. You said locally, there's the most protection for your property. But we skipped that little middle section of the state. So where does the state fall into all of this?
I'm going to talk a little bit more about local first, because some places also you can do landmarking in your community, which is instead of like a local historic district, it's essentially you still have the guidelines and all that, but for a specific building. So basically so if I had my house locally landmarked, there would be a list of guidelines that tell me what I could do to change the exterior. So that protects like an individual landmark building. So they're probably not going to do that for a residential house unless it was like really significant or like a significant person lived there or something for your town. But so there's individual landmarking and then also local historic zoning with the guidelines for protection on that. But really local ordinances and regulations and zoning are going to be the things with the biggest teeth in terms of saving historic buildings. But for the state level, Tennessee does not have a state register. But I do know that some other states do. But you'd have to look up whatever state you might live in. I would contact your SHPO, which they all have different names. Like ours is the Tennessee Historical Commission, but it's the State Historic Preservation Office. But if you type that into Google and into the Google machine, I'm sure you can get a contact and learn a little bit more about your state register. So for a state level, some places do have the state registry, but also if you if you're on the National Register, a lot of times they have state tax credits available. State of Tennessee does not currently. We're working on that legislation, but so like Kentucky, and I don't know the percentage, but if you're listed on the National Register or you're in a historic district that's listed on the register, that makes you eligible for getting a % back of rehab cost on your historic house. So that's like a state credit. So that's a benefit for getting your house individually listed or in a district for the National Register.
So would you say that state by state, it varies whether or not they offer tax credits, but is the tax credit program pretty standard across the board for states who do have one? Did I ask that right? So, or is it all going to be completely different?
I think they're all going to be a little different, but they all are going to be based on the Secretary, well, most likely based on the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation, which is what the National Park Service goes off for their tax credits. And they're probably going to be a percentage. So, I mean, I think the highest percentage I've ever seen a state is do 30% back in tax credits on your rehab cost. But most of them are going to want your building. And I'm fairly confident in saying that all states are going to say that your building has to be listed on the register or eligible for the register in order to get the state tax credits. I will say their federal government used to have a historic tax credit for a building, not a house, that was not necessarily eligible for the register, but was of a certain age. So any building over a certain age, because a building's not historic just because it's old.
Right.
It has to have significance. So when you're looking at the National Register, there's 4 criteria that you evaluate the building on. The first one is Criterion A, which is significance related to an event or some broad pattern of history. So for like a district, it could be about community development, or if it was a railroad, it could be for engineering. The criterion B is significance related to a person. This president lived in this house. Criterion C is for architecture. So you have to have significant integrity related to architecture. Is it made by a certain master? Is it have certain craftsmanship or special elements that make it a certain style? Why is it significant in that way? And then the fourth one is D, which is archaeology. So I've never worked with D.
The archaeology sounds interesting. So that would be involving doing digs and probably digging where people have lived to see what was thrown away in the past.
Yeah. So we have a lot of sites here in Tennessee related to obviously Cherokee removal, Trail of Tears, Civil War, that sort of thing. But I've never written a nomination for that. I don't really have the background of archaeology for it, but it's really interesting.
Right. I imagine there's a lot out west too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, so I get this question all the time, and I think I know the answer to it. But people always ask me, they're like, can I get a grant to do repairs on my house?
Yeah. So grants are something I work in a lot. And in Tennessee, I mean, we don't really, besides historic tax credits in the state, I'd say that most of the time grants are only available to nonprofits or local governments. Most of the time for residential, it's not going to, unless it was like a house museum that was a 501c3, or I don't know if a state or the National Trust thought your house was, this really high style, significant house that Frank Lloyd Wright built or something. Like, it's very rare for just an individual residential house to receive grant funding, but I get those calls every week.
Right.
So in Kansas, they do actually have a grant program. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Cross House. Ross has a blog, and so he has received grants to do restoration to his historic stained glass windows and other parts of his house.
It's residential?
It's residential, and he's actually not living there because it's not quite livable yet.
Right.
And he's received, I know definitely he's received 2, if not 3 grants to do restoration, mostly on the stained glass, because his house has over 60 stained glass windows, and they're amazing. I
think that, I know here we don't really have anything like that, but I think, if it's a special house, like it is very unique and it is, done by a certain master, that there could be consideration especially from nonprofits instead of government funding for grant. Yeah. I think federal or state grants, they're never going to give it to a residential just because there's lots of red tape involved with that. But I think like a local nonprofit could be a possibility.
Right. That makes sense. And I'm wondering too, if people are confusing the terms, get state tax credit and grant. Like they're not, they know the difference between those two, but when they're thinking about where this money comes from, perhaps they're getting confused about the tax credit versus a grant.
Yeah, it could be. I think tax credits are really great. And I really hope that we can get them in Tennessee because 20% back on a rehab, that's
right.
So significant for people, especially because, we all know how much money goes into the rehabilitation of our historic houses.
Yeah, it's true.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know, basically, what is the most encouraging part of your job in preservation?
So I also taught at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, history of architecture. Only did it one semester just because of timing, but one of my favorite things about being in the field and doing what I love is somebody coming to me and being like, I never noticed that building before you brought it up. Or I never noticed that they had, that feature until you mentioned it. And now I see it every time. So I think the thing that is most encouraging to me is just spreading like my passion for it and letting other people, kind of what we're talking about windows earlier. It's just like letting people know the importance and them realizing the importance and kind of acknowledging it themselves and thinking some things, even just thinking, oh, that building's really cool and I've never noticed it before. So that's definitely my favorite thing. And through everything like Instagram and all that, it's more of just like the acknowledgement and letting more people know about it and enjoy historic architecture. And definitely if I could help save a building.
That must feel so good.
I got a building in 2014. I wrote a nomination for the National Trust 11 Most Endangered list. And it was a really cool, I think it's cool, like mid-century life insurance company building here in Chattanooga. And they were going to demolish it. Well, UTC said that they were going to, in the paper, it said they were going to demolish it to build new dorms. And I got it on the list, and now they're reusing the space.
Wow, that's awesome.
Somebody told me, I remember, everyone trolls on the internet, and I said, is it historic because it's so ugly? Not everyone appreciates that style, but I was like, it's so cool. It's like a Mad Men style office. And I went back and found all these original brochures from the building when they built it. And they had a bowling alley in the basement for employee recreation to keep them healthy.
Wow, that's awesome.
Like, it's just, I don't know, it's just got that mid-century feel. And
sure.
I was like, I think it would be great. So I think just like showing people not only the benefits, but like why something is special really makes it worth it.
So the flip side of that question, of course, would be, what is the most discouraging part about your job?
I think for me, it's personally being a woman in the field, and especially with like construction, people don't think that, I know what I'm talking about. So that's always discouraging, and people arguing about, it's not worth it to keep this building. We should demolish it. And every time you lose a building, especially one that you fought for, a little piece of your heart dies. But
right.
That's probably the most discouraging, is like getting people to listen.
Well, it's been wonderful to have you here and answer all these technical questions, because people ask me technical questions a lot. I think that they give me way too much credit. So
yeah, same here too.
So I love having industry professionals on the podcast to ask those questions to get the real answers. I can give real answers, but I certainly don't know everything. I appreciate the vote of confidence, but I do not know everything. I'm learning as well.
Well, I will say, I think that everything you're doing is great. And there's some people that on Instagram, like, shouldn't have done that, and now everyone's going to think that that's okay, but I've never thought that about you. So
I
think you're doing a great job. I think that when you don't know something, you're very quick to tell people, we'll figure out the answer, and I really enjoy it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It makes me feel good to hear that, because I definitely don't want to be an armchair expert. I want to be able to help where I can help, but it's really important to me to admit when I don't know. We're all in this together. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And I think there's a special place for people that are the craftsmen and that are doing hands-on work, because I'm more of, the paper pusher over here with historic zoning and national register nominations. And, I don't know how to do a lot of that stuff. So I've been inspired by your windows, and I've been restoring windows. And I always look to you guys for those answers, even though I have, the degree in preservation. So
I think it takes all of us working together in the different capacities. So we need paper pushers.
Yes, it definitely does.
We need the paper pushers. We need the craftspeople. We need everybody coming together
exactly
to work on this common mission. And we all bring to it our own strengths. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was a lot of fun.
My preservation friends, and they're like, they were on the National Trust list for podcasts. So
that was so exciting.
I was not surprised that you guys were on the list.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's nice to talk to you. We'll see you around on Instagram. We'll link everything in the show notes.
Great. Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
Fun.
We'll talk to you later.
Thank you for listening to True Tales from Old Houses. We hope you enjoyed the show today. You can find out more about everything we talked about today and transcripts on the show notes at truetalesfromoldhouses.com.
Many thanks to all of our guests this season: Amy Hevelin, Kathy and Garrett Poshusta, David Stoll, Ashley Goldman, Tyler Stroud, Scott Seidler from the Craftsman blog, Paige Polly, Rhonda Deeg, and Terry Wollenweber, who also made our first field trip possible, Drew Zink, and Melissa Mortimer.
And a special shout out to Jason Shaw at Audionautics for all of our music, including our theme song, and Tony Gee from Treat Joe Sound for audio tech and general sound wizardry. Stay safe, wash your hands, care for one another.
Until next time.
Bye for now.